The sun over the New Mexico territory had a way of stripping a man bare. By mid-morning, it hung white and pitiless, bleaching every bit of color into glare and dust, as if the whole desert had been baked too long in God's own furnace. Rafe felt its weight pressing into his shoulders as he rode through the tight jaws of Saltwind Canyon, his horse snorting against the heat. His thoughts felt as dry as the creek beds that once cut this land like old scars. 35 years behind him, though, most days he carried twice that on his back. He rode alone, not out of preference, but because the world never seemed to find a place for someone like him. The wars were over, the uniforms gone, but the bitterness soaked into the dirt, stubborn as the chalky dust that coated everything out here. Folks claimed peace had settled in. Rafe had never met it face to face. His pockets were empty, and his hope was running just as thin. But the man waiting deeper in the canyon promised work, simple work, quick work, paid in real silver. And when a man's future shrinks down to the width of a horseshoe print in the sand, he quits asking questions. Rafe spotted Brock Hale standing beside a cluster of pack mules and canvas bundles planted in a small patch of shade like he owned it. Brock looked to be in his early 40s, skin burnt brown from digging under the desert sun. Beard cut short as if he liked pretending he was respectable. But those restless little eyes of his told the truth. He was the kind of man who'd stare at a grave and wonder what he could steal from it. "Well now," Brock drawled when he saw Rafe approaching. "Look what the wind dragged in. I figured you might have turned tail." Rafe swung off the saddle dust, puffing around his boots. "You said you had work." "That I did." Brock's grin split his face like a scar. 3 days. Just 3 days guarding a cage. Easiest money a man like you'll ever see. A nearby mule brayed as if calling him a liar. Brock stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Just keep your eyes on the girl. Don't let her out. Don't let anybody in. 3 days, then you walk off with a heavy purse." Rafe didn't answer at once. He wasn't scared of work, and he'd watched prisoners before drunks, thieves, men who needed iron between them and the world. But something in Brock's tone felt wrong. Too smooth. Too eager. "Who is she?" Rafe asked. Brock rolled his eyes. "Some Pueblo girl from up north. Caught her poking around one of my dig sites. Claimed she was protecting something." He laughed, sharp and mean. "They all say that. Truth is, call it whatever name you like, she's trouble." He leaned in, voice dripping like oil. "And I know how your kind tends to soften over trouble like that. So hear me plain. Don't let her talk circles around you. Don't let her cry and twist you up. You understand?" Rafe held his stare unblinking. "I understand." Brock smirked, pleased with himself. "Good. Last thing I need is an Apache forgetting his place." That one stung, but Rafe didn't show it. He'd heard worse and survived worse. "Come on," Brock said, waving him deeper into the canyon. "Let me show you the job." A crude iron cage sat under an overhang of red rock. The bars looked hastily hammered together, but strong enough to pen a mountain cat if you had to. Inside, curled in the corner with her wrists bound, was a young woman, Sani. Though Rafe didn't know her name yet, she lifted her head at their approach. Strands of dark hair clung to her cheeks, dust streaking her skin. But her expression wasn't fear. It wasn't anger either. It was something steadier. Something like a person who had already decided which part of themselves no one would ever break. Brock tapped the bars with a smug flick. "There she is. Wild little thing, isn't she?" Sani's eyes slid past him and locked onto Rafe. She studied him so intently the rest of Brock's voice blurred away. There was no hatred there, only a quiet, desperate plea that struck harder than any shouted demand. "Please," she whispered, voice raw but steady. "Help me. I'm not what he says." Rafe felt something shift inside him, like an old door opening after years of rust. Brock barked a laugh. "See, already trying to reel you in." He nudged Rafe's shoulder. "Don't fall for it. 3 days, that's it. After that, my buyers take over." buyers. Rafe's stomach tightened. Whatever Brock had planned, it wasn't justice. Sonny pressed her trembling hands to the bars. They're going to sell me. They think I'm worth something to people far away. But I have parents. A village. They'll be searching for me. Please don't let him. Rafe forced himself to step back. I took the job. I'll do the job. Her face tightened, not from weakness, but from a kind of breaking that ran deeper. Brock Hale clapped his hands, once sharp and pleased. Good. Then we're settled. He tossed a key toward Rafe. You hang on to that. And remember, don't listen to a damn thing she says. These Pueblo girls can cry the paint off a canyon wall if you give 'em half a chance. Rafe caught the key. The iron felt colder, heavier than it had any right to be. As Brock and his men mounted up and rode out their horses, kicking up dust, Sonny stayed pressed against the bars. Her eyes stayed locked on Rafe, not begging anymore, not pleading, just studying him with a quiet question hanging between them. What kind of man are you? Rafe didn't have an answer. Not yet. But as silence settled into the canyon and the desert heat seeped into his bones, he knew that by the end of 3 days, he would. Morning eased in soft and gray, thin clouds, dragging low across the sky like the desert itself was worn out. Rafe woke to the crackle of the last campfire embers and a weight sitting on his chest, heavier than sleep. He'd guarded prisoners before, but this was the first job he wished he'd never taken. He carried a tin cup of water and a small bundle of food toward the cage. The ground snapped under his boots, brittle from the cold night. Sonny pushed herself upright, her back against the iron knees, tucked close. She didn't look up until he was a few steps away. I brought you something to eat, he said quietly. She didn't reach for it right away. Instead, she studied him again, curious, not afraid, and somehow that shook him more than anger ever could. Thank you, she murmured at last. Rafe passed the food through the bars, careful not to touch her hands. When her fingers wrapped around the tin cup, they trembled, but she steadied them fast. Pride clung to her like another layer of skin. She drank slowly, each sip as deliberate as a prayer. Why are you working for Brock Hale? She asked, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. Rafe shifted his stance. Work is work. That's not an answer. Maybe it's the best one I've got. Sonny's gaze softened, but the sadness inside it cut deeper than any accusation. He plans to sell me, she said softly. Not question me. Not punish me. Sell me. Like a pot or a trinket. Like something he dug out of the dirt. Rafe didn't answer. He couldn't. Not yet. She broke off a piece of dry bread, and for a while they listened to nothing but the wind sweeping dust around their boots. Then she spoke again, steady as before. You're Apache, aren't you? He stiffened. Does it matter? I only ask because my people. We honor yours. We know what soldiers did to your families, what miners did, what was taken. She paused. My husband used to say the Apache were guardians of the high winds. He admired that. Rafe looked away, jaw tightening. I'm no guardian. Sonny tilted her head, studying him with patient calm. No. Then what are you? He didn't answer because he didn't know. The hours dragged by in the slow crawl of a desert day. Rafe sat a few paces away, sharpening a dull knife just to keep his hands busy. Sonny hardly moved, saving her strength. At one point, she hummed soft, fragile, like a prayer carried on wind. It reminded him of songs his grandmother sang back, when life still made sense. By noon, the sun rose high enough to scorch the iron, heating the bars until they shimmered. Sonny shifted uncomfortably. Is it always this warm here? Rafe let a small breath escape, almost a laugh. This is cool weather. She closed her eyes, resting her head against the hot bars. I miss the adobe walls of my village. They stayed cool, even on days like this. You grew up near Red Mesa Pueblo, Rafe asked. Her eyes snapped open. You know that place? Passed through once, he said. Long time ago. What were you looking for? Rafe hesitated. Work. Something that didn't require too many questions. She gave a faint smile. And did you find it? No. Her smile faded, replaced by something quiet and thoughtful. I used to make pottery, she said softly. Before all this, my husband taught me. His hands knew how to shape clay like it was breathing. Her voice wavered, not weak but fragile, like a thread tied to another life. What happened to him? Rafe asked, though he already sensed the answer. A mine collapse, she whispered. 3 winters back. They dug into a hillside they never should have touched. The earth pushed back. She swallowed. His grave lies in a canyon near Peach Springs. When those men, Brock Hale's crew, started digging around his resting place, grabbing whatever they thought they could sell, I tried to stop them. I shouted until my throat burned, begged them to leave it be. They took me instead. Her hands tightened around the bars. All I wanted was for them to stop disturbing the dead. That's all. The plain truth in her voice hit him harder than any blow. That evening, as the sun bled low and the air cooled, Sani shifted restlessly inside the cage. She scratched at her arms and neck as though the desert itself were crawling across her skin. You doing all right? Rafe asked. It's this dust, she admitted, embarrassed. It's everywhere. I haven't washed since they took me. She hesitated. I hate asking for anything, but I itch so badly I can barely think. Rafe felt heat rise in his neck. I can't let you out. She slowly lifted her palm. If I wanted to run, I wouldn't even know where to go. You know this land. I don't. She nodded toward the canyon walls. Please. Just a moment. Just enough to wash. He stood there a long time, torn between duty and something far gentler, something dangerous. At last he let out a low breath. All right, he said, but we go together. He unlocked the cage and helped her step out. Her legs shook from days confined, and without thinking, he steadied her. Her skin was warm, soft, startlingly human. They walked to a narrow stream, tucked between stones. Sani glanced at him shyly. Turn around, he did, and he kept his eyes fixed on the canyon wall, listening to the soft splash of water and fighting the unfamiliar flutter in his chest. When she finished, he guided her back and locked the cage again, though now the click of the latch felt wrong to him. Too final, too cruel. Night settled in, star-filled and silent. For the first time since the whole job began, Rafe sat close beside the cage, close enough to hear her breathing, close enough to speak without raising his voice. She looked up at the sky. Funny, she murmured. Even from in here, the stars look the same as they did back home. And Rafe, for reasons he couldn't explain, found himself wishing she wasn't behind iron bars at all. The night deepened, turning the canyon into nothing but shadow and starlight. The kind of quiet that drags old memories to the surface, whether a man wants them or not. Rafe sat with his back to a smooth slab of sandstone boots, stretched out hat beside him. Sani sat inside the cage legs, folded neatly beneath her, watching the heavens like she was listening to some secret only she could hear. Neither of them spoke, but silence between two lonely souls has a way of softening, turning into something almost tender. You see that one? Sani asked at last, lifting her chin toward a bright star near the eastern edge of the sky. My people call it the Traveler. It's the one we follow on long journeys. Rafe traced her gaze. Apache call it the Lost Rider. So different, she whispered, but looking at the same thing. A soft wind stirred the dust. Somewhere far off, a coyote cried a long, wavering note echoing through the canyon. It felt right somehow, like the desert recognized the solitude the two of them shared. Sani pulled her blanket tighter. Do you ever miss your home? She asked. Rafe stared at the dirt. Home's not a place that stays put. It's people, and most of mine aren't around anymore. I'm sorry, she said. He shrugged, as if it didn't matter, but it did. More than he wanted to admit. The world changed. Nothing I could do to stop it. Sonny watched him with a softness he wasn't used to. Not pity, but understanding. "You've lost people too," she said gently. "I can feel it. It's in the way you talk. Or don't." Rafe let out a dry laugh. "Didn't know I was that easy to read." "You're not," she said, offering a faint smile. But grief recognizes grief. The words hit deeper than he expected, settling inside him like a stone finding its place. Sonny shifted the chains at her wrists, clinking softly. "My husband was a quiet man," she said. "Not strong like you, not fierce, but gentle. The kind of man who bent so others wouldn't break." Rafe listened in silence. "He used to paint symbols inside our pots. Little marks of gratitude, or hope. He said they helped hold the world together." Her voice thinned. "When the mine collapsed, I went to that canyon every week. I'd sit where the earth swallowed him. I'm not sure I ever forgave the land for it." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, soft, steady, without shame. Rafe cleared his throat, speaking softer than he intended. "You said Brock Hale's men were digging around that place." "Yes," Sonny replied. "They were searching for old burial offerings, things meant for the dead. But they were careless. They shattered pottery, scattered ashes, laughed about it." Her fingers curled tight around the bars. "I couldn't let them do that. Not after what happened to Nokan. I tried to stop them. They dragged me here instead." Her voice trembled, and the sound tugged loose something in Rafe's chest he thought had long since hardened. "They had no right," he said quietly. "Graves deserve respect, always." She watched him steadily. "Do you believe that even when the world doesn't respect the graves of your people?" His jaw tightened. Memories flickered. Burned camps, soldiers ripping open burial bundles, settlers bragging about relics taken from the dead. "No," he said at last. "I don't think the world respects much of anything these days." For a moment, silence drifted between them, not empty this time, but shared. Then Sonny's voice softened. "Rafe, do you think I deserve to stay locked in this cage?" He lifted his head. Her eyes met his, clear and steady, not pleading, just wanting the truth. "I think," he said slowly, "you were protecting something sacred, even if these men don't understand that." "And you?" she asked. "Do you understand?" He hesitated, not because he doubted her, but because he doubted himself. "I don't know," he whispered. "But I'm trying." A faint smile brushed her lips. "Trying is more than most men ever do." Heat rose in his chest, an emotion he wasn't ready to name. He couldn't even say when it started. Maybe when she didn't look at him like he was a threat. Maybe when he realized he was the only shield standing between her and whatever fate Brock Hale had planned. Sonny rested her forehead lightly against the bars. "Rafe, if you could choose a different road, any road, what would you choose?" he thought. A long while, remembering years spent drifting from one empty job to the next, swallowing dust, watching his world shrink until hope barely fit inside him. "I'd want to be something better," he said. "Better than this." Her eyes glimmered in the moonlight. "Then you still can be." He swallowed hard. Her words landed deeper than any bullet. They stayed like that until the stars wheeled across the sky and cold crept along the canyon floor. Somewhere in the quiet dust wind and the hum of desert night, Rafe realized he wasn't guarding Sonny anymore. He was guarding himself. From the man he feared he had become, and for the first time in years, he didn't know which burden was heavier. Dawn slipped into the canyon on silent feet, brushing the red cliffs with pale gold. Rafe had barely slept. All night he replayed Sonny's words, the calm conviction in her voice, the way she told him he could still choose another path. It hammered through him like a steady drumbeat. By the time sun touched the cage, he had brewed more coffee than one man could ever drink and paced a trail in the sand until the ground was worn flat. The key to her cage weighed like fire in his pocket, almost burning through the fabric. Sonny stirred, blinking against the light. Even after days in captivity, she carried herself with quiet dignity. She sat up, brushed dust from her blanket, and offered him a small, weary smile. "You were awake early," she said. "Couldn't sleep. Bad dreams." He shook his head. "Too many thoughts." She nodded knowingly. Thoughts can be louder than nightmares. Rafe stood there searching for the words he needed, but fate never waits. The faint thunder of hoofbeats snapped his head toward the canyon mouth. A thin trail of dust rose in the distance. Someone was coming, and not with good intentions. Rafe cursed under his breath. He grabbed his rifle and scanned the canyon. "Stay back, Sonny." She barely had space to move, but she tried. Moments later, Brock Hale rode into view with two of his roughest hands, Voss and Cree, crowding behind him. Even from afar, Rafe could see Brock slumped in the saddle, loose and smug, reeking of whiskey even from a distance. He'd arrived early. Way too early. Brock jerked his horse to a stop so hard the animal reared. "Morning, friend," he called, voice thick with drink. "Thought I'd swing by. Make sure our little treasure hasn't been giving you trouble." Rafe kept his rifle angled low but firm. "You weren't supposed to be here until tomorrow." "Plans change," Brock slurred, grinning. "My buyer wants her clean, calm, and in chains by sunrise tomorrow. So today," Brock Hale growled, "we start breaking her spirit. A little lesson in obedience never hurt." Without waiting for permission, he slid off his horse and lurched toward the cage, patting around for the ring of keys he thought he still carried. Sandy shrank back, fingers locking around the bars, fear flickering in her eyes, though she tried to bury it. Something inside Rafe snapped clean in two. "You're not opening that cage," he said, stepping forward. Brock halted mid-stride and turned, lifting his brows slowly as if Rafe had just spoken nonsense. "Come again," I said. "You're not opening that cage." One of Brock's hired hands. Voss shifted uneasily, glancing at Cree. They weren't used to anyone pushing back, least of all an Apache they figured would follow orders for a handful of coins. Brock's grin faded. "Careful, Rafe. I'm paying you to stand there and look tough, not to grow a backbone." Rafe didn't move. "She's done nothing to deserve what you're planning." "Oh, she's earned it plenty," Brock snarled. "She stuck her nose where it didn't belong. Cost me money. Now I'm getting it back with interest." He yanked a thin, braided strap from his belt, cruel and ready. "We'll start light. Just enough to teach her." Rafe's rifle lifted fast, sharp as a rattler striking. "Put it away," he said evenly. The whole canyon went still. Even the wind seemed to freeze. Brock stared at him, stunned. Then he barked a laugh with no humor. "You threatening me? I hired you to keep her in that cage, not to play hero." Rafe's silence was answer enough. Brock's mouth twisted. "Thought so. She's been talking to you, filling your Apache head with stories." He spat into the dirt. "You're a fool, a sentimental fool." From inside the cage, Sonny's voice trembled. "Rafe, you don't have to." "Yes, he does," Brock cut in. "'Cause now he's chosen his side, and it ain't the smart one." One of the men reached for his pistol. Rafe didn't aim at him. He aimed straight at Brock. "Step away from the cage," Rafe said. "Now." Brock hesitated. Rage flooded his face, dark red and dangerous. For a moment he looked ready to lunge to test whether Rafe meant it. But the way Rafe held that rifle steady, deadly, made him think twice. Fine. If Brock couldn't win now, he'd settle for revenge later. "You want to throw your life away for a Pueblo widow," he sneered. "Go on. But once I'm done with you, I'll take her anyway, and she'll wish you'd kept quiet." Rafe stepped closer, voice dropping to a growl. "I'm giving you one chance to walk away." A long, tight moment stretched between them. Then Brock spat at Rafe's feet. "Suit yourself." He jerked his head at Voss and Cree. "Mount up. We'll come back with more rifles, and a hell of a lot less patience." They thundered out of the canyon in a cloud of dust, but their retreat brought no comfort. Rafe turned towards Sandy. She was breathing hard, hands trembling around the bars, but her gaze met his with with fierce, aching certainty. Why, she whispered. He lowered his rifle and reached into his pocket for the key. His voice came out rough. Because you were right. I'm tired of standing by while wrong men do wrong things. He stepped closer. And because if I let them take you, I won't be able to live with myself. The key shook between his fingers. Rafe. She breathed, tears filling her eyes. His heart pounded like hooves on stone. You want freedom? He asked. She nodded, one tear sliding down her cheek. He unlocked the cage. The door creaked open, sounding like a new life taking its first breath. Come on, he said softly. We're leaving. Right now. And for the first time since he'd taken the job, Rafe felt the weight shift, lifting only to be replaced by something much heavier. Responsibility, hope, and the sharp knowledge that there was no turning back. The moment Rafe and Sani stepped out of that canyon, the desert felt different, clearer, still louder, as if every grain of sand knew they were fugitives. The sun slid toward the horizon, painting the mesas in copper and blood-orange, shadows stretching long across the flats. They didn't have an hour to spare. Rafe tightened the straps on his saddlebag, glancing toward the canyon mouth, the way a hunted animal checks the wind. We need to move fast, he said. Hale wasn't bluffing. He'll be back with guns. Sani's voice was soft but steady. Then let's go before the night swallows us. They started on foot, moving slow. Sani was still weak from the days spent behind iron, so Rafe kept a steady hand at the small of her back, guiding her over hard-packed ground littered with brittle shrubs and sun-bleached bones. An evening wind kicked up, carrying the faint metallic smell of a storm crawling in from the horizon. Halfway up a slope of loose shale, Sani stumbled. Rafe caught her instantly. She steadied herself, breath shaky. You all right? He asked. She nodded, though her hand didn't slip from his right away. Just tired. I'll manage. For a heartbeat, they stayed like that, still as stone. The wind tugged her hair across her cheek. In her eyes he saw exhaustion and something else he wasn't ready to name. We'll rest soon, he murmured. But rest never came. A sharp echo cracked across the desert, hoofbeats hammering the ground fast and furious. Behind them, dust spiraled upward, like a rising storm cloud with riders buried inside it. Rafe cursed under his breath. They found us. Sani turned, eyes widening. 4 figures thundered across the basin. Brock Hale leading the charge, a dark silhouette outlined by the dying sun rifle propped across his saddle. Run, Rafe said. They bolted down the slope, sliding onto the far side where tall stone pillars jutted up like forgotten tomb markers. Rafe pulled Sani into the narrow passages between them, weaving through tight gaps no horse could push through at speed. A gunshot split the air. A bullet screamed past Rafe's ear and shattered against rock. Sani ducked, gripping his sleeve, breath sharp and fast. Stay low, he whispered. Brock's shout cracked through the stone maze, cruel and mocking, bouncing from wall to wall. Rafe, I warned you not to let her twist you up. Now look at you, throwing your life away for a widow with pretty eyes. Sani flinched, and Rafe snarled through clenched teeth. Ignore him. They clawed their way along the winding path between boulders until they reached a ridge that overlooked a dry wash. Below, the land opened into scattered mesquite, a thin promise of cover. We can make those trees, Rafe said. Once it's dark, we lose them. Sani hesitated, panting hard. Rafe! He turned. Her voice trembled not with fear, but with something painfully honest. If this is wrong, if I'm dragging you into danger you never deserved. I need to say it now, as she swallowed. I care about you, more than I should, for someone I barely know. The truth stunned him, not because he didn't feel it, but because hearing it aloud stripped him bare. When you brought me water, she whispered, tears gathering, but refusing to fall. When you listened, when you looked at me like I wasn't a burden. Rafe stepped close, lifting her chin with gentle fingers. Sani, From the first night you made me remember I'm still human. Gunfire cracked again, closer. They jolted at the sound. No time, Rafe said, voice raw. Come on. They raced down into the wash, just as Brock and his men appeared on the ridge, behind them, silhouetted by the last blade of sunlight. Enough running, Brock roared. Hand her over and maybe I'll let you die quick. Rafe shoved Sandy behind a mesquite stump. Stay down. He fired first. Brock's lead rider toppled from his saddle in a burst of dust. The final two split apart, circling like predators closing in for the kill. Rifles raised. Rafe dragged Sani deeper into the wash as bullets chewed the dirt around them, filling the air with shouts, hoofbeats, and the thunder of his own heartbeat. They reached a cluster of smooth stone reflecting the wash's narrow curves. Rafe pressed his back to the rock, pulling Sani close. I've got 6 shots left, he muttered. They've got more. Sani met his eyes, steady, unshaken. Then use the ground. Use the rocks the way you showed me. Shadows hide better than bullets. Her courage struck him like a blow. She was no longer the terrified captive he'd met days ago. She was something fierce, something unbroken. The fight turned into a dance of shadows and echoes. Every time one of Brock's men tried to flank them, Rafe timed his shots with perfect precision, using the twists of the canyon to mask their movement. 2 more riders fell, their horses screaming as they bolted into the gathering dark. Only Brock remained. Brock. He dismounted, stalking forward with a wolf's grin. I'm gonna drag her out by her hair, he hissed. And you're gonna watch every second until I put a bullet between your Apache eyes. Rafe stepped from behind the rock, gun raised. The 2 men locked eyes, fury against resolve, while the desert wind screamed through the wash like a restless spirit. Brock fired first. Sometimes when she thought no one else was paying attention, Sani would lift her face toward the heavens and whisper something in her own tongue. A prayer, a promise, maybe a piece of memory carried on the wind. And Rafe found himself watching her more often than he meant to. One evening, as the sun dropped behind the mesa and painted the land in gold and blood red, he saw her waiting near the creek. The water glimmered around her ankles. I wanted to thank you, she said, stepping closer, not only for saving my life, but for believing me. Rafe swallowed hard. I didn't nod at first. Believing me now is enough, she murmured. They stood together as the desert slipped into dusk, the sky swelling with stars that seemed close enough to touch. Her hand brushed his tentative testing. He didn't move away. Sani! His voice rasped with feelings he still didn't know how to name. She turned toward him, eyes reflecting starlight like wet glass. We can heal here, she whispered. You and I. Not fast. Not easy. But little by little. He closed his fingers around hers, warm, steady, certain. The desert breathed around them, soft and patient. And for the first time in years, Rafe didn't feel like a man standing outside his own life. He felt grounded, seen, alive. Tomorrow he would hunt. Tomorrow she would teach. Tomorrow they would keep building a life neither of them ever imagined they'd find. But tonight they simply stood beneath the same sky that had once looked down on them as strangers. Now it watched them as something else entirely. 2 souls done running, 2 hearts learning how to stay. In the hush of the western night, Rafe and Sani discovered that freedom is never given, it is fought for. And though the frontier remained wide and wild, they faced it side by side with new hope beating strong inside their chests. Sometimes a man doesn't find home. Sometimes, if fortune is kind, home finds him first. Thank you for riding along with this story. If it touched you, please subscribe, leave a comment, and share your thoughts. Your support keeps these frontier tales alive. All stories are created for entertainment purposes and may include fictional elements or dramatized interpretations inspired by historical settings. We use AI tools, voiceover visuals, scripts as creative assistants. However, all content is reviewed, refined, and edited by humans, to ensure emotional authenticity and storytelling quality. We fully comply with YouTube's policies regarding AI-generated content and do not use any deep-fake techniques or misleading recreations of real individuals. All visuals and supporting materials are properly licensed. Sharing, re-uploading, modifying, or distributing any part of this content in any form requires written permission. We appreciate your support and respect for original creative work.